Read and reflect. Jawaharlal Nehru writes about the timely arrival of Gandhiji to Indian politics when the country was in dire need of such a leadership. Gandhiji was like a beam of light that removed the darkness. Jawaharlal Nehru makes a right assessment of Gandhiji in his Discovery of India. Read the excerpt. And then Gandhi came. Jawaharlal Nehru. World War One ended at last, and the peace, instead of bringing us relief and progress, brought us repressive legislation and martial law in the Punjab. A bitter sense of humiliation and a passionate anger filled our people. We had become a derelict nation. Yet, what could we do? How to change this vicious process? We seemed to be helpless in the grip of some all powerful monster. Our limbs were paralyzed, our minds deadened. Large numbers of people cut off from the land and incapable of any kind of manual or technical work joined the swelling army of the unemployed and helpless, hopeless, sank ever deeper into the morass. They did not know where to look, for neither the old nor the new offered them any hope. What could we do? How could we pull India out of this quagmire of poverty and defeatism? Not for a few years of excitement and agony and suspense, but for long generations, our people had offered their blood and toil, tears and sweat. And this process had eaten its way deep into the body and soul of India, poisoning every aspect of our life. And then Gandhi came. He was like a powerful current of fresh air that made us stretch ourselves and take deep breaths, like a beam of light that pierced the darkness and removed the scales of our eyes, like a whirlwind that upset many things, but most of all working of people's mind. He did not descend from the top. He seemed to emerge from the millions of India speaking their language. Get off the backs of these peasants and workers, he told us. All of you who live by their exploitation, get rid of the system that produces this poverty and misery. Political freedom took a new shape then and acquired a new content. Much that he said we only partially accepted or sometimes did not accept at all. But all this was secondary. The essence of his teaching was fearlessness and truth, and action allied to these always keeping the welfare of the masses in view. The greatest gift for an individual or a nation, so we had been told in our ancient books, was abhaya, fearlessness, not merely bodily courage, but the absence of fear from the mind. The dominant impulse in India under British rule was what was that of fear, pervasive, oppressing, strangling fear, fear of the army, the police, the widespread secret service, fear of the official class, fear of laws meant to suppress and of prison, fear of the landlord's agent, fear of the money lender, fear of the unemployment and starvation, which were always on the threshold. It was against this all pervading fear that Gandhi's quiet and determined voice was raised. But be not afraid. Was it so simple as all that? Not quite. And yet, fear builds its phantoms, which are more fearsome than reality itself, and reality, when calmly analyzed and its consequences willingly accepted, loses much of its terror. So, suddenly, as it were, that black pall of fear was lifted from the people's shoulders. Not wholly, of course, but to an amazing degree. As fear is close companion to falsehood, so truth follows fearlessness. The Indian people did not become much more truthful than they were, nor did they change their essential nature overnight. Nevertheless, a sea change was visible as the need for falsehood and furtive behavior lessened. It was a psychological change, almost as if some expert in psychoanalytical methods had probed deep into the patient's past, found out the origins of his complexes, exposed them to his view, and thus rid him of that burden. There was the psychological reaction also, a feeling of shame at our long submission to an alien rule that had degraded and humiliated us, and a desire to submit no longer, whatever the consequences might be. We did not grow much more truthful, perhaps, that we had been previously. But Gandhi was always there as a symbol of uncompromising truth to pull us up and shame us into truth. What is truth? I do not know for certain, and perhaps our truths are relative and absolute truth is beyond us. Different persons may and do take different views of truth, and each individual is powerfully influenced by his own background, training, and impulses. So, also Gandhi. But truth is, at least for an individual, what he himself feels and knows to be true. According to this definition, I do not know of any person who holds the truth as Gandhi does. That is a dangerous quality in a politician, for he speaks out his mind and even lets the public see its changing faces. Gandhi influenced millions of people in India in varying degrees. Some changed the whole texture of their lives, others were only partly affected or the effect wore off, and yet not quite, for some part of it could not be wholly shaken off. Different people reacted differently, and each will give his own answers to this question. His call of action was twofold. There was, of course, the action involved in challenging and resisting foreign rule. There was also the action which led us to fight against our own social evils. Apart from the fundamental objective of the Congress, the freedom of India, and the method of peaceful action, the principal plans of the Congress were national unity, which involved the solution of the minority problems and the raising of the depressed classes, and the ending of the curse of untouchability. Realizing that the main props of British rule were fear, prestige, the cooperation of people, and certain classes whose vested interests were centered in British rule. Gandhi attacked these foundations. Titles were to be given up, and though the title holders responded to this only in small measure, the popular respect of these British given title disappeared. New standards and values were set up, and the pomp and splendor of the viceregal court and the princess suddenly appeared supremely ridiculous. Rich men were not so anxious to flaunt their riches. Outwardly, at least, many of them adopted simple ways, and in their dress became almost indistinguishable from humbler folk. He sent us to the villages, and the countryside hummed with the activity of innumerable messengers of the new gospel of action. The peasant was shaken up, and he began to emerge from his shell. The effect on us was different but equally far reaching, for we saw for the first time, and it were, the villager in the intimacy of his mud hut, and with the stark shadow of hunger always pursuing him. We learned our Indian economics more from these visits than from books and learned discourses. The emotional experience we had already undergone was emphasized and confirmed, and henceforward there could be no going back for us to our old life or our old standards. What was the idea of India which he was setting out to mold according to his own wishes and ideals? I shall work for an India in which the poorest shall feel that it is their country, in whose making they have an effective voice, an India in which there shall be no high class and low class of people, an India in which all communities shall live in perfect harmony. There can be no room in such an India for the cause of untouchability or the cause of intoxicating drinks and drugs. Women will enjoy the same right as men. This is the India of my dreams. Proud of his Hindu inheritance as he was, he tried to give to Hinduism a kind of universal attire and included all religion within the folk of truth. He refused to narrow his cultural inheritance. Indian culture, he wrote, is neither Hindu, Islamic, nor any other holy. It is a fusion of all. Again he said, I want the culture of all lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible, but I refuse to be blown off my feet by any. I refuse to live in other people's houses as an interloper, a beggar, or a slave. Influenced by modern thoughts currents, he never let go of his roots and clung to them tenaciously. It is not surprising that this astonishingly vital man, full of self confidence and an unusual kind of power, standing for equality and freedom for each individual, fascinated the masses of India and attracted them like a magnet. He seemed to them to link up the past with the future and make the dismal present appear just as a stepping stone to the future of life and hope. Thus, he effected a vast psychological revolution not only among those who followed his lead, but also among his opponents and those many neutrals who could not make up their minds what to think and what to do. Adapted, an expert from Jawaharlal Nehru's The Discovery of India.